So tonight we are going to talk about the story of salvation. And we're starting through the covenants, okay? So we have some key terms to talk about, and then we'll get into the covenants a little bit more. So on your paper, you'll start on this side, the side that has, the key terms on it. Okay. Before we can even begin, I think it's important to understand that the story of salvation is not just a story for the Jewish people. The Old Testament is a story about us as well, okay? And it's a story of God setting the stage for redeeming his people to bring us to where we are today, okay? So the first thing we need to understand, and this will be readdressed over and over and over again, but the first thing we need to understand is that the Old Testament foreshadows the new, okay? St. Augustine says, the old is revealed in the new, and the new is concealed in the old, okay? So the New Testament and the Old Testament work together to tell us this beautiful story. And we can only understand what story is being told to us in the Old Testament when we have the New Testament, okay? And the New Testament brings light to the old. Yeah? Okay, so the first order of business, we're going to talk about covenants. We need to know, what is a covenant? Okay? Simple way to put it, a covenant is how you make someone part of your family. If you want to say a fancy definition, is an extension of kinship through sacred oath. Okay? So that's how you make someone part of your family. What are two examples of making someone part of your family? Adoption. Yes, good one. Marriage. Those are the two examples, okay? So when we enter into marriage, we're making a covenant with a person. A covenant is not a contract, okay? It is a sacred oath. A contract is just signing papers, two people making an agreement. That is not what a marriage is, sacramentally, okay? An adoption is not just signing papers, making a legal agreement. It's making someone part of your family, okay? So in salvation history, we have these instances where God's reaching out to his people to draw us into his family through these sacred covenants, okay? Second definition is mediator, okay? A mediator is someone who represents a group in a covenant, okay? Simple. It's a mountain. You know what a mountain is, okay? But the mountain doesn't necessarily have a mound, a hill, a mountain, okay? And there are four things that change when we're on a mountain. And that's, we're kind of alone, right? We're alone with God. And we see things in a different context, right? We see more, and everything looks smaller. Like the worldly issues just look smaller, okay? Now, we're going to have fun tonight with the lesson, but we're going to go back to kindergarten with our drawings, okay? Because we're going to be drawing stick people tonight. And I just want a disclaimer. This is not my idea. It's not original. I'm just giving it to you, okay? I'm following Dr. John Bergsma. He wrote this book, Bible Basics for Catholics. It's a great book, simple but wonderful if you want to get it on your own. Second disclaimer is it's been probably about a year and a half since I've taught this class. And usually I'll have a smaller class, shake the dust off, and haven't had that. So bear with me. There's a lot of stuff to remember how to effectively teach, but I did prepare. I just, be easy on me. All right.
Leslie, can you say the author of that book again?
John Bergsma. It's Bergsma. All of it will be on the test. Okay. So we'll start from the beginning. In the beginning, the earth was formless and void, right? So this is the story of creation. And God God tells us about his creation in Genesis, the very beginning, okay? So on the first day, there was light and darkness. On the second day, he separated the waters with a dome. The third day, he gave dry land and vegetation. The fourth day, created day and night. The fifth day, the fish and the birds. And then the sixth day, man, that's right. Okay, so let's start drawing our creation. We have our mountain, okay? Can y'all see that? I can move this. We have our mountain. What's the name of our mountain? You're gonna kick yourselves when you know. We have Mount Eden. How do we know Eden was a mountain? Well, in Genesis it tells us that water flowed out from it, okay? Water flows from uphill to downhill, okay? So let's put a little river in Eden. And I also am going to ask you to excuse my drawings. Okay? So I think that if we can say Genesis 2:15, we have water that flows out from it, okay? Are you drawing? You all have pencils at your table, so you can erase if you need to. Okay. So on day 6, God created man, right? Yeah? And we know that God created man how? In his image. Okay, so let's let him shine with the glory of God. Okay? Right? He's in his image. And God gave Adam a task. What was his task? His very first task? To name everything. So he kind of spoke for God, didn't he? So we'll call him a prophet, and we'll open his mouth wide because he's speaking for God. Okay? And then after he named all the animals, he had what over them? Dominion. You can say it out loud. Yeah, he had dominion. Who has dominion? Kings. Kings have dominion, right? So we'll put a little crown on his head. I should change my colors, huh? Okay. And then Adam was also given another duty to guard and protect, to toil and keep, okay? And so this is a priestly role, because that's what the priests do. They serve and they guard. So let's give him a little priestly stole. And then, after God made all the animals, he said none of those are adequate as a helpmate, right? So he created Eve. So let's put Eve. And I would say let's put her in a little dress, but she's not dressed yet. Okay? Okay. So, but Adam is now a bridegroom. So we gave him a little 3-fingered hand with a ring. Okay? Now what else do we know was on Eden? Was there a garden? Yeah, so we'll draw a little tree. I'm just going to stick with green for a little while. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. So there was a garden. And God said what? He said, all this is yours. Everything's yours. Except one, right? Okay? So what happened? we have a little snake, right, that comes in. Please forgive my drawing, okay? If y'all had to draw up here in front of everybody, it'd be this bad, okay? Okay, so a snake comes into the garden. Somebody wasn't protecting the garden, right? That was Adam's job, okay? So the snake says to Eve, what? Eat it. Yeah. So God told her, don't eat this tree or you will die. And the serpent says, but will you really die? Okay? So he's planted the seed of doubt. Okay? So this is when humanity begins its doubt for God. Okay? So what happens? They eat of the tree. Okay? I think I've gotten a little ahead of myself. Just rewind a second. First we have Adam. Okay? So we're going to, on your paper, you have the covenant name. This is the Adamic covenant because who's our mediator? Adam, okay? So before the snake entered the garden, we had one more thing that happened. On day 7, the rest. That was the rest. Okay? So the sign of this covenant of God calling Adam and Eve into his family was the Sabbath day, the day of rest, okay? So the sign of this covenant is the Sabbath. And then you have a spot on your paper also for extension. What that means is, how did God's family grow by this covenant? Okay? So this was the first example of marriage. Okay? So that's how this covenant grew. It grew into a marriage. Okay? So we have this great covenant, and then we have, shortly after, the seed of doubt was planted, and man fell. Sinned against God. Okay? Broke the covenant. Immediately. Okay? So, what happened? They realized they were naked, right? And we'll give Eve a fig leaf dress now. And then God expelled them from Eden, right? And when he did that, he put an angel at the east of the entrance. Last time I did this, I put my angel on this side, and my husband was here, and he was like, that's not east. So, just so that I can put this in context, it's east, okay? Okay. So they were expelled from the garden, and Eden was lost, right? Okay. So in this lesson, we'll kind of fast forward through some of the lower points and then zoom in on the high points, okay? So what happened one generation after Adam and Eve? They had 2 sons, Cain and Abel. And what happened? Murder. One generation after eating the forbidden fruit, then it turns to murder. Okay? Cain killed Abel out of jealousy, right? And then Abel then had children, propagated the earth, and one of Cain's great-great-great-grandchildren, Lamech, takes more than one wife, okay? So polygamy then enters the scene. And anytime polygamy enters the scene in Scripture, it's kind of an understood evil, okay? And so what happened is you had a bunch of fatherless children because there was one father, many wives, lots of kids. And what happens when you don't have a father to teach your children, right? Then it gets unruly, okay? So the wickedness of fatherless children increases. And we have our next covenant on the scene with Noah. Are y'all drawing this too? Yeah? Do yours look as good as
All of
Okay, so we have Noah. So this is what we call the Noahic covenant, and it's mediated by Noah. I'm going to change to a different color, keep it exciting. French, you know?
It is the drawings of society.
So in Genesis 6, we read, "The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and every imagination and thoughts of his heart was only evil." And God was disappointed in us, okay? So God calls Noah to help him to save what he wants to save, and God recreates, okay? So God asks Noah to build what? An ark. And it's going to be big, like a barge, with a little roof, okay? So there's our ark. We're not going to get into the exact size. This is not to scale. Okay? Okay. So all the creatures of the earth are on here. So this has become kind of like a floating Eden, okay? So we'll make this. Okay, so it rains and rains and rains, okay? And all the evil is washed out, right? And then Noah emerges from the ark after what? A dove came back with what? An olive branch, that's right. So Noah knew he could come out, there was land again, okay? And so now he's going to let all the animals out of the ark. Here's where it gets fun, because I'm about to draw some animals. You know what? It can be whatever animal you want it to be. Giraffe. There's little giraffes, yeah. Okay, so we have little giraffes. And I'm sorry, but a snake is easy, so we'll have a set of snakes. They still live, right? Okay, so Noah lets out the animals, and his first act is a priestly act. He's going to offer a sacrifice. Okay? So let's give Noah a little stole. And here's his sacrifice here. I'll get a little flame and some smoke. Pitiful flame. All right, and I'm going to read from Genesis what happens here. God said to Noah and to his sons with him, "Now I am establishing my covenant with you and your descendants after you, and with every living creature that was with you, the birds, the tame animals, and all the wild animals that were with you, all that came out of the ark. I will establish my covenant with you, that never again shall all the creatures be destroyed by the waters of the flood. There shall not be another flood to devastate the earth. God said, This is the sign of the covenant that I am making between you and me and every living creature with you for all ages to come. I will set my bow in the clouds to serve as a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. When I bring clouds over the earth and the bow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and every living creature, every mortal being, so that the waters will never again become a flood to destroy every mortal being. When the bow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature, every mortal being that is on earth. God said to Noah, "This is the sign of the covenant I have established between me and every mortal being that is on earth." So what's the sign of the covenant? The rainbow. So we're going to draw our rainbow. That looks like Noah and the Ark, huh? Yeah. Okay. And what mountain was this on? Does anybody know? Ararat, that's right. I'm going to put it over here so I'm not bending so far. So that's where the ark landed. Okay, so we have the Noahic covenant mediated by Noah. The sign of the covenant is the rainbow. And God's extended his covenant to grow into what? So Noah brought some other people with him on the ark. So we had marriage first, and now we have a family, okay? Yes? Okay. So, this is going to be a trend. Just as soon as God makes a covenant with us, what happens? There's a fall. Okay? And so, just like with Adam, he fell asleep on the job, so to speak, and the serpent came into Eden, so too does Noah fall asleep on the job. But this time, it was because he was drunk. Okay? He was drunk on wine, and Scripture tells us that his son saw his nakedness. Okay? Now, that's a euphemism for something more severe than just seeing him without his clothes on. Okay? But we're not going to get into technically what it could and couldn't mean, but we know it's not good. Okay? It's not good. So, there's some things that are echoed in this covenant breaking that happened in Eden. So he consumed something, okay? He was naked. He felt shame, okay? This is all the same as Eden, right? Because Adam and Eve consumed something. They realized they were naked. They felt shame, right? Okay. So sin has re-entered the world again. God wiped it out, and it's already back in, okay? And then the wickedness grows, and people decide, you know what? We're going to make ourselves great. We're going to make some bricks, and we're going to build a tower up to the sky. Right? Do y'all remember this? Yeah. Okay? And so they tried to build the tower, called the Tower of Babel. And God realized, you know what? They're in cahoots together. I'm going to have to scramble up their language and scatter them. Okay? And so that's what happens after the flood with Noah. Okay? So we're fast forwarding a little bit now. The people have been scattered, they've resettled, and God calls someone. God calls Abram. He says, go from your country. Go from your land, from your relatives and your father's house, to a land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you, and I will make your name great, so you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and curse those who curse you. All the families of the earth will find blessing with you. Do you all remember this? Okay. So we're moving on. So God makes some promises to Abram that he'll be a great nation, his name will be great, and he'll have great blessings, right? But Abram is like, I don't see it happening. I don't have any kids. What good is all this blessing if I don't have anybody to pass it on to? Okay? And so God makes a covenant with him. Okay? This covenant, I'm not going to draw, I'm going to tell you about, and then we'll get to the mountain part, okay? So God says, to show you that I'm serious and you will have a child, I want you to bring me some animals for sacrifice. A 3-year-old heifer, a goat, a few birds, okay? Cut them in half and lay them out, okay? And so in the evening, a fire pot comes through. You have a flame to show God's presence, right? Anytime we see fire, typically in Scripture, it's to show God's presence, right? The burning bush, Pentecost, the fire, right, over the apostles' head. Okay, so you have the flame that comes through the pieces, and this is God's presence. And what this covenant is very familiar to an ancient Jewish person because it's called a covenant of pieces. And so what it's kind of saying is, if I break my side of the promise, let this happen to me. What's happened to these animals, okay? So it's kind of like, cross my heart, hope to die, stick a needle in my eye, except more extreme, because you're not just losing an eye, you're losing half your body, okay? So God says, all right, we've made this covenant. You're going to have a child. But does Abram believe him? No, he doesn't. He gets impatient, okay? He doubts. It's a common theme too, right? Doubt. So he doubts God. And his wife tells him, you know what? You should take my maidservant Hagar. And you should impregnate her. And that way, you know, you'll have something, you know, you'll make a great nation. And you'll have someone to give this blessing to. That wasn't what God wanted, right? Because Abram had a wife. He told her, you're going to have a child. He meant a legitimate child, okay? So God says, all right, we're going to renew this covenant because I need this to happen, okay? This is the plan. You deviated from the plan, but I did not, okay? So let's draw our mountain. And what mountain is this? Do you know? Moriah. Okay. So God says, you didn't trust me. So we're going to renew this covenant. But this time, you have a covenantal duty. Okay? Covenantal duty, we're not going to draw. But we will draw a symbol. Covenantal duty becomes circumcision. Okay? We're obviously not going to draw it. Okay? So we'll draw a sword. Okay? Okay. So God ratifies the covenant, but with a duty. Okay? And it's the way Abram betrayed God's trust, right? So it's going to hurt this time, okay? And he had to, I don't mean to be funny, I mean to be serious. So God gave them the duty of circumcision, and that was circumcision to himself at 90-ish, 90 plus, he had a couple more years, to all his slaves, to his whole household, okay? I imagine he did not win favors that day, okay? So we have Abram, with our symbol here. And I totally lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry. And God changes his name, right? So Abram is exalted father. But God changes his name to what? Abraham, which means father of multitudes. But he still doesn't have any kids. God's telling him, trust me, okay? So this covenant is the Abrahamic. Our mediator is Abraham, thank you. And the sign of the covenant is circumcision. C-S-I-O-N? Circumcision? S-C?
C-I-S-I-O-N.
Thank you. Okay. And God's family grows into a tribe. Okay? But there's more to the story with Abraham, right? Yes, there's more to the story. God tests Abraham, and God says, take your son, your only son, who you love. Okay? Already we're here in the New Testament in that, aren't we? Okay? Take your son, your only son, who you love, and offer him as a sacrifice. Okay? So I'm going to read what happens if you'll indulge me for a minute, because I don't want to mess up that paraphrase. Sometime afterward, God put Abraham to the test and said to him, Abraham. Here I am, he replied. Then God said, take your son Isaac, your only one, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah. There, offer him up as a burnt offering on one of the heights that I will point out to you. Early the next morning, Abraham saddled his donkey, took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac, and after cutting the wood for the burnt offering, set out for the place of which God had told him. On the 3rd day, Abraham caught sight of the place from a distance. Abraham said to his servants, stay here with the donkey while the boy and I go over there. We will worship and then come back to you. So Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and laid it on his son Isaac. His son's carrying the wood, okay? While he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the 2 walked on together, Isaac spoke to his father Abraham. Father, he said. Here I am, he replied. Isaac continued. Here are the fire and the wood, but where is the sheep for the burnt offering? My son, Abraham answered. God will provide the sheep for the burnt offering. Then the 2 walked on together. When they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. Next, he bound his son Isaac and put him on top of the wood on the altar. Let's draw this in, okay? So Abraham built his altar. We'll make it a tall altar. And then he bound Isaac. Okay? Then Abraham reached out and took the knife to slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Here I am, he answered. Do not lay a hand on your boy, said the angel. Do not do the least thing to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you did not withhold from me your son, your only one. Abraham looked up and saw a single ram caught by the horns in the thicket. So Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering in the place of his son. So we have a little bush here and a ram stuck in it. It's going to look like a bee. Those are horns, okay? And that's the ram. That's pathetic. Maybe one of you can draw a better ram, huh? Abraham named the place Yahweh Yireh. Hence people say today, on the mountain the Lord will provide. A second time the angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven and said, I swear by my very self, oracle of the Lord, that because you acted as you did, in not withholding your son from me, your only one, I will bless you, and make your descendants as countless as the stars of the sky and the sands of the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the gates of their enemies, and in your descendants all the nations of the earth will find blessings because you obeyed me. That's important. All the nations of the earth will find blessings. So you see that this is going to grow to all the nations of the earth, okay? So there's two things that Abraham is doing. First of all, he's offering a sacrifice, okay? That's a what duty? Priestly duty, okay? So we're going to give him a priestly stole. And then he said something. He said, God himself will provide the sacrifice. That sounds prophetic to me, huh? So we're going to draw in an open mouth because he's prophesying, okay? Y'all are so quiet. Does anybody have any questions? Exactly. That's why I stopped and said that. So I think a lot of people make an assumption that Isaac was a little fella, but to be able to carry the wood, he had to be at least a teenager, right? So we're not talking about a baby here because he carried the wood. That points towards the New Testament, right? But without the New Testament, you would just, oh, he carried the wood. You don't think anything of it, right? Are there lots of things popping out in these stories like that? He could have disobeyed him. That's exactly right. If he was strong enough to carry the wood, Abraham was over 90, because in his 90s, he didn't have any children still. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That's good input. Okay, so Isaac is spared, okay? And Isaac goes on to have 2 children. Do you know the 2 children's name? Jacob and Esau, okay? This is one of the stories I like to tell. I tell my husband a lot of times to make him feel guilty. I'm confessing it, okay? But Jacob and Esau, Esau was a hunter and burly man. He went out hunting one day and came in and was hungry, and Jacob had just cooked himself a pot of red porridge, okay, red stuff. And Esau said, I want it, give it to me. And Jacob said, all right, give me your birthright. I'm glad y'all are laughing because that doesn't make sense, right? But if you think about it, when we sin, we're doing something so silly and giving up our birthright. So that's how I use the story to make my husband feel guilty. Shame on me, okay? Shame on me. But I'm like, really? For a bowl of porridge, you're going to do that? So Jacob takes the birthright, okay? And he goes and has 12 sons, right? We're going to finish up before we get to the next one. He has 12 sons. So Jacob's name becomes what? Israel. That's right. Okay, that's where we get the 12 sons of Israel. There's Jacob. God changed his name. Anytime God commissions someone he gives them a new name. Okay? So we have Abram, go to Abraham. Simon, go to Peter. And all of you, when you're confirmed, you will have a confirmation name because you're being commissioned to do something, to go out in the world, okay? So it's very special. So Jacob becomes Isaac and has 12 sons. The first 10 are with the first wife. He was tricked into marrying. And the last 2 are with his beloved, Rachel, okay? And he has a beloved son of Rachel, and his name is Joseph. That's right, Joseph. Okay, so we have the story of Joseph and the multicolored dream coat. So Jacob loved Joseph so much, and he just poured all his affection on him, and of course made his brothers jealous. And so his brothers staged a heist, so to speak, and they told their dad that he was eaten by wild animals, but really they sold him into slavery. Okay, they sold him into slavery, and he made his way to Egypt. And in Egypt, he started interpreting dreams, okay? So he worked his way up through interpreting dreams and became the second in command to Pharaoh, okay? And Pharaoh had this dream once. He kept dreaming that there were 7 fat calves and then 7 really skinny calves, okay? And Joseph said, well, this is what this means. Is that you'll have 7 years of plenty, and then you'll have 7 years of nothing, okay? So start saving up some grain so that you can survive it, so you can survive the famine, okay? And so the Pharaoh did that. He started saving up so he could survive the famine, and famine came. And Joseph's family was not in Egypt, where they had prepared for it. And so they came looking for help, and they found Joseph, and Joseph helped them, right? And that's how the Israelites, the 12 sons of Israel, made it into Egypt, okay? And then they started having children, and it made the Egyptians nervous. And the Egyptians said, you know what? They're going to be our slaves, okay? So that's where we're going to stop for the night. Israel is in slavery to Egypt, okay? And I think you know who's next, right? Does anybody have any questions? No? Y'all are so quiet. I figured I'd have more laughing with your drawings. I want to cover. Yes, ma'am. I hope I have an answer.
This is something that's
Okay.
we have Adam and Eve. You know where I'm going?
I know where you're going.
Yeah.
Go ahead and ask. Cain and Abel and one son.
Okay. Who's the mother?
Who what?
Who is the mother of?
Cain's children?
Yes.
Okay. So I had this question as well. And I asked Father about it. And here's his answer. This is not my answer. Okay? So everything in the Bible is true. Right? But everything that is true is not in the Bible. Okay? So we know through science and reason that there were other peoples, right? And they weren't in the image of God, right? They were, we have Neanderthals, right? And we have, what are the early human?
Cro-Magnons.
Yes, there you go. Okay, so there's evidence that maybe that was it. I don't know, okay? But I think it's important to remember the story that's being told to us, okay? And it's our family history. Scripture is not a scientific book, okay? It's a spiritual book, and it's telling us the story of God reaching out to us. So that's the information that Scripture is going to give us, and that's what we need to see from it.
Good answer.
Okay?
One more.
Sure.
Also, I'm going to ask one. How do you know that all of these animals in the ark, there is a replica of the ark? Is it
In
Tennessee or
Oklahoma?
something?
I think it's Oklahoma.
And you look at that, and you can go in, and you look at it, you can, there's no way. So, My husband watches all the history and the science channel. Well, Noah took the DNA. So it wasn't really an animal. And he and I argued back and forth. And I said, no, it's an animal. He took animals. No, they couldn't fit on them. They couldn't on food.
So I think here's the point of the story with Noah, is that they were saved through the waters, okay? What does that foreshadow to us? Baptism, okay? And so God is telling us a story that he will take care of us and we will be saved through the waters, okay? How all the animals fit, I don't know. Again,
and I think it's literal. You know, you can't, I know you imagine 2 by 2 in this boat. So, but I don't think it's that way. It's a literal translation.
To say there weren't multiple arcs.
there you go, yeah.
I mean, when I say there weren't, it,
Mhm.
you know, it's kind of like Cain and Abel. It's not to say that there weren't 12 children from Adam or 50. Yeah, it's just not involved.
Right, it's not what we need to tell the spiritual story that we're being told. Anybody else? Anybody else have any questions? Okay, remind me next week we stopped, Israelites are in slavery in Egypt, okay? And we'll finish. And next week, it's really like, we bring it home. It's so good, okay?